kind of like it's like my ear is watching me. Just bring the chairs, put it in front. Perfect.
Oh, why is it streaming?
What?
It says it's offline, but it shouldn't be.
Did you turn off the other one?
Yeah, but when I go to the live, like it says live under here, but not.
Is the Google Hangouts window up?
Okay, it's good. It just needed. But
Thank you.
I mean, it should be fine.
So you go
That's
watch.
why.
You go watch it.
Yeah, I'm watching from another screen. It looks good. And why isn't it on here? Why does it say this is offline?
No, it's going on. I
It
can
is?
watch it. Everything is fine.
Okay.
Hmm. 3D, okay. Ready?
So welcome back to our fall Sundays program, Vision Under the Tree. Um, Even if this is your first time attending this class, uh, and to the rest who have been attending, just a reminder that after this, each of these classes are available for listening through podcast download from our website. Go to udharmanc.com. Under the tab resources, under there, look around, and you'll find them. So that's one place. Another place is on YouTube, which is what we're live streaming now. After the live stream, it gets converted automatically into a YouTube video. So that's also available. If you go look for the channel called Urban Dharma NC, it should be on there, except for the very first one, I think, which we did not, and maybe even first and second, we did not live stream. We've just recently started using YouTube live stream. So the purpose of this particular course is to go back, for some of us revisit, for some of us visit for the first time, the Buddhist approach to meditation in its kind of most fundamental form. And in fact, if you have been attending the last 3 Sundays, you might have noticed that I have said several times that, in fact, I don't think we should even emphasize so much about form and technique. Which is not to say, I do think that in the Buddhist tradition, it has a real wealth of forms and techniques when it comes to training the heart mind. And to many people, that in fact is sort of the attraction of Buddhism. I've told this anecdote several times. I'll say it again. I remember one time we hosted, not here, in a different place, when I was teaching at Warren Wilson College. The Buddhist group there, we hosted a Buddhist teacher that was living in Asheville for a short period of time before him and his wife moved out west. And when he came to us and introduced himself, he introduced himself as a Buddhist Baptist. Or was it Baptist Buddhist? I forgot which one was first, but both were there. And so he gave a little bit of his autobiography, which included being an ordained member and went to seminary and was then ordained and is a Baptist preacher. Probably no longer actively preaching at the church, but nonetheless, that's the background. And so later in the program, somebody, when he said, ask me questions, somebody asked, could you elaborate on Baptist Buddhist? So he said, okay, I became Baptist. He said, I became Christian because I was really taken by certain lines from the Bible. And he said, yes, we know the Bible has a lot of other things, but this line that says, to love your neighbor as yourself, there's no greater commandment. And he said that was what sold him on Christianity, and because of his cultural background, then he became Baptist, became a Baptist preacher. And so he says that's why. He said, but after a while, he felt that though that was the greatest commandment, he could not find ways to arrive at that position from within the resources that was given him within the Baptist tradition. So he said, in the end, he had to look for ways of training that. And so he found Buddhism. And that, of course, I'm sure many Baptists will disagree, but what this illustrates is, kind of quite common that a lot of people are attracted to Buddhism because there is a wealth of techniques and forms to train the mind. So hence, all sorts of different meditation traditions and techniques. And maybe because the way that Buddhism is presented in this culture is that it's not really religion. There is nothing to convert to. You don't have to change your name per se. You don't have to change your diet per se. You don't have to change anything per se. But you can enhance whatever it is that you're already doing with certain techniques and forms. As a result of that, sometimes, just sometimes, there is an overemphasis on technique and forms. But for this course, and generally I would say kind of people who say they want to study with me, I will say to them, and they will find out that I don't emphasize so much on technique and form per se, but more importantly is to relate to techniques and forms as methods that are given for us to try, to apply, to experiment. You have to take it to heart and do it. You can think a little bit about it, and I encourage you to think about it, but you should not confuse the thinking about it and and the doing it. Those are two different things. Then some people get very good at doing it, meaning sticking to a particular form, to a particular technique, but not understanding that the form and the technique is to change the mind, is to train the heart mind, is to train the mind. So this work of training the mind, this work of training the mind, this work of training the heart mind so that you change it, presumes certain things, assumes certain things, which is right now we're confused and we are distracted as a result. And that distraction is what causes what Buddhists call dukkha. Last week I talked about dukkha. The etymology of that is ka is space, duk is unhappy. To be in an unhappy space, possibly physical space, but more importantly, to be in an unhappy mental, emotional space, to inhabit an unhappy spiritual space is what is defined as dukkha. The opposite of dukkha is sukha. Su is happy. To have sukha, to be in sukha, is to be in a happy place. In order to not be stuck in dukkha, in unhappy places, Buddha says we need to see things as they are. So that's one way of understanding the purpose, the goal, and the approach of meditation. Now, again, we say meditation is a technique, but again, sometimes overemphasizing technique creates the problem of techniques here, results over there. And then we get caught up in this, am I applying the technique right? Or is this technique the best technique? And then you add our American can-do attitude and extreme pragmatism attitude, right? Then can-do, very pragmatic, and also very impatient. Then if it doesn't work immediately, I got to go find another technique. Or worse still, oh yeah, I know that. I've heard about that already. Okay, what else can you tell me? What else can you tell me, right? So we should not relate to the technique, the method, in such a kind of in such a kind of instrumental way. So very helpful is that, for example, in the Soto Zen tradition, the founder of the tradition, Dogen, says, or apparently according to the story of Dogen, I don't know if you are familiar with him, 13th century Japanese Buddhist monk, went to India went to China to train and to study, and then came back and started a new Zen tradition in Japan. Apparently that his sort of spiritual or existential crisis is reconciling the relationship between practice and awakening. Right? Conventionally speaking, we understand the relationship between practice and awakening is practice, 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 wham, awakening. Or practice, 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 a little bit of awakening. Practice, 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 a little bit more of awakening. Practice, 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 maybe a little bit more of awakening. That is if everything goes right. Yeah, and then you go, well, in my case is practice, 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 lost. Practice, 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 lost. Practice, 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 fell asleep. Practice, 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 a little bit of awakening. Practice, 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 fell back asleep. But in whichever case, right, so then there's a question of what is the relationship between practice and result or awakening? So apparently Dogen, he said that he studied with everyone in Japan. Nobody could answer that question, so he said, I have to go to China. And if you think these days it's a hassle to travel, wait till you're in 13th century. Majority of people who travel never made it. Some end up making more humans in between traveling and arriving. But a lot of things happen, you know. So he went, crossing the ocean, which was treacherous. And he went to China, and he came back because he got his question answered. And the answer to that question of what is the relationship between practice and awakening, he says, to practice is to awaken. So in the Soto tradition, the form of meditation they call is often translated into English as just sitting. Just sit. Why? Because to sit is to awaken. And so that whole kind of duality between, right, practicing and getting there is collapsed. It's sort of like in a more mundane way we say, right, the kind of the journey itself is what it is about, right? So that's a useful kind of point of view to keep in our heart as we apply the methods. Don't hope for, don't wait for, don't get distracted by some kind of ideal result that you think would come out on the other side, waiting for you. But that if you can kind of experience the immediacy of awakening in one moment, then we say the Buddha mind is present in that moment. If you're able to remain with awareness, remain awakened for one moment, in that very moment, that is awakening. That is the result that you're looking for. It's right in front of you, right under your nose. Then you say, well, if it's right in front of me, right under my nose, why do I always lose it? Where are my glasses? Where are my glasses? Where are my glasses? Why? Because we're distracted, right? And in particular, or worse, where are my glasses? Where are my glasses? Right? Maybe that's even more appropriate, Not even this, right? It's like, where are my glasses? Where are my glasses? And so here, what are we distracted by? I think we're distracted by the notion of something that exists beyond this moment. Right? So we think to be awakened is to be aware 24 hours. But 24 hours is a concept. And of course, a concept cannot really deliver. Or you say, oh, to be awakened, to experience the result of meditation, I should be stress-free for at least 6 hours a day. Or at least the hour that I have determined I'm going to meditate. Then of course, you're going to not see awareness, not be aware, because you're being carried away by a concept and hoping that the concept would deliver results. The concepts cannot deliver results. So every moment in that one moment, right there, to sit is to wake up. And then to sit is to wake up. And to sit is to wake up. Then your body says, I'm tired, I'm checking out. And even falling asleep isn't for 5 minutes or 15 minutes or even 1 minute. Even falling asleep is momentary, followed by another moment of falling asleep, followed by another moment of falling asleep, or being distracted by a whole chain of thoughts. It's also momentary. In fact, there's no chain. Chain is an abstract when we say chain of thoughts. Because past, present, and future cannot inhabit the same space. Past thought, present thought, future thought, right? That's how we kind of come up with the idea of a chain of thoughts, right? Me yesterday, me today, me tomorrow. But that me, that I, merely exists as an abstract, as a concept, right? By definition, past, present, and future don't inhabit the same space. So where's the I? The I only exists insofar as that moment. But in that moment, which is constantly not that moment, what I? Buddha's teachings about no self or not self, it's not really about, it's absolutely not about denying the self. It's not about denying the self. We say it's getting us to notice the impossibility of an enduring self. The impossibility of an enduring self. That's what the training is aiming at. The training is not aimed at convincing you or making you get rid of any self, because to have a self makes you a bad person. but the impossibility of an enduring self. It's an invitation to pay attention and see if it's possible to have an enduring self. Yes?
What is meant by enduring in this sense? Like having multiple lifetimes or?
Oh, between this and next moment, it's enduring enough.
So rather than the whole, or maybe not rather than, but there's the whole stream of consciousness, like the idea of the chain of consciousness and our concept of self. And then there's the enduring self that one might experience in a moment.
Like the way you
No,
define
there's no
yourself.
enduring self.
Like that the self could change every moment, and so there's no like definite, is that what you mean? Like finite,
The self
like
could
defining
change.
it over.
The self could change. You're already assuming. I know it's a problem with language, right? The self changes. Very subtly, we're already signed on to an enduring self that changes. But in fact, the whole gamut of change is what we gloss over as self. The whole gamut of change is what we gloss over as self.
Like when you say, "This is how I am," we say these sentences so often of like, "I'm like this," or "Well, when this happens, I get really stressed out."
Yes.
Like that defining.
Yeah.
Like that creates an enduring self.
Yes. Which is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Which, yes.
So, so is the concept or the experience of awareness experiencing non-self?
You could say that, yeah. Yeah, if when awareness is directly experienced, notions of self are not at work. Yes.
Is it self-evident when you have a moment of awakening, you will just know that it is?
Awakening here is in the sense of awareness. Yeah, not you know the kind of classic, you know, Buddha sat under the tree 2,500 years ago, you know, Big Bang.
But if you have a meditation practice and you experience being awake, being aware,
Yes.
You'll know. It's just something
Yes,
you know.
yes.
And it will be qualitatively different from the moment before that was not awakened or aware.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Will it be sukha? Will it be sukha?
If we pay attention. If we pay attention. Yes.
How is the non-self related to the Western concept of soul, of an enduring soul?
Do you want them related or not?
I don't see how they fit.
Are you trying to fit them together?
We don't see.
Right. So I'm trying to get to understand why do you want them to fit or not fit?
Because when you die, I think a lot of Westerners think that there's a part of you that will continue on, your soul will continue on.
Yeah, sure.
But that's not the same as, it's not the same as having no self. I think I just need to probably think about this.
Can they be in agreement, those two ideas? Like, do you think, maybe that Baptist guy?
So you're asking, is it possible to believe in some sort of enduring self and also practice the kind of meditation that exposes the impossibility of self?
Yeah, yeah, like an enduring
Oh,
soul,
I see.
that is like awareness itself without any attachments
Uh-huh,
of like identity.
uh-huh.
Can you believe that? And also,
You can believe whatever you want. Not, not being snarky here, but that's the Buddha's answer. Like, well, you can believe whatever you want. His position is more that I'm not interested in metaphysics, he says. Not interested in positing or not positing entities that I don't see how it affects you right now. So I think at the beginning I pointed out the Buddha is kind of odd in the realm, in the world of spiritual figures, in kind of resolutely taking the position that let's not have our starting point be on this thing that, because in his own time, his contemporaries were very invested in the notions, in various notions, with differences here and there about a spirit, an indwelling spirit. And the Buddha kind of said, irrelevant to what I'm doing. So last week, I think I said that even the term spirituality is a little bit off. If you want to get, pay attention to diction, Buddhist position don't even talk about the spirit. It talks about body and mind. It talks about physical processes and mental emotional processes. And it says that we can all directly experience these two sets of processes. And that happiness and suffering comes from particular types of relationship towards and with these physical and mental emotional processes. So he says, look at the mind. And here we're not talking about mind, with a capital M. Here we're not talking about that. He's just saying, look at how your heart mind works. Like right now. And then if you look, then you're like, oh, it seems like it just goes on and on and on and on. When is it just gonna shut up? Then we think, I want to meditate so that it will shut up. Shut up! Shut up! Then the more you yell at it, right, the more it echoes back. Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. See, that the Buddha was interested in. Once people try to take that into, perhaps that's yourself echoing. And he's like, I'm not going with you over there because I don't know what to do with that. He's not a romantic, that's for sure. He's an empiricist, but not in a cold and caring sort of, empiricist. Ultimately, matters of the heart, he had great concern about. But he quite, refused to kind of get into what he considered to be, he called a thicket of views. Don't get caught up in a thicket of views and opinions. Now, of course, he has some views and opinions. Let's not kid ourselves. He has some views and opinions. But his views and opinions are about the pointlessness of getting caught up in a thicket of views and opinions. He says, learn to just simplify, learn to just let go, learn to just pay attention. Don't think up too many concepts about what this is. But if there's one thing that we can do, that we need to do, right, is to pay attention to, and there are many, many ways of talking about this, even across Buddhist traditions. So one way to talk about this is to talk about mind or heart, right, and the activities of mind. And to try to see how those are two different things. Not two completely unrelated, clearly they're related, but they are sort of like two ends of a particular spectrum. But right now, we spend all our time with activities of the heart, activities of the mind, and we have no acquaintance, no familiarity with the heart of the mind itself.
Can I ask a kind of dumb question? Like, how do you get, if like this is at the root of Buddhism and what the Buddha thought, to a place of having like the Dalai Lama and like this whole organization of all these different structures and hierarchy, like that are all expressions of Buddhism, when like it sounds like it's so much simpler than that? Is it just that like everybody eventually is coming to such similar realizations that those structures make sense? Or is like it kind of like other religions where these sort of very human, like faulty structures have been designed around beautiful ideas, like Christianity and like lots of other religions that have like all sorts of kind of random power dynamics in them that don't really have to do with the root of what's center? Is it like, how do you sort of justify having like a Dalai Lama with like, who's like reincarnated, if there's no interest in like whether a soul is?
The Buddha taught multiple lifetimes. Yeah, so that much I think was clear, that he taught that multiple lifetimes. In a way, too complicated to answer this, except to say that not just Buddhism, I think any religion, any tradition was born, in the context of a particular vision. How literally you want to take vision. Some traditions more literally than others, right? A particular vision, a particular awakening, a particular realization. And then that is transmitted from person to person. And human beings are social animals. Social animals build social structures, good or bad, I think it's up to each of you to decide. I was trained professionally as a college professor specializing in religious studies. So from where I stand, I have a lot more tolerance for, what other people might say craziness. But I say, hey, well, it's human beings. Human beings are wonderful and terrible. Sometimes I feel I'm wonderful. Other times I think I'm terrible. There you have it, So Buddhism, or teachings of Buddha, primarily has been transmitted in the context of religion. Religion as a category of human experience and human ability to imagine. So I think you can look at it both sides, the power of imagination. I mean, simplicity that I talk about here is to kind of temporarily take us back to, right, that core. Then secretly, what I'm not telling you, which now I guess I have to tell you, is that after you get the core, we'll introduce you to some crazy things. Hopefully, not sinister crazy things, but crazy things because we're human beings. Because, this essence always kind of has an outer shell. And some of these crazy things involve, how many bodhisattvas can dance on the head of a pin? Let's start counting. Why not, right? And to some people, that is like, an insult. They're counting how many angels can dance on a pin. But to others, it's like, when can we start? It's like, what? You would rather go shopping? Hello? Right? It's all kind of like. Tibet was not a Shangri-La. It was messy. But despite all the mess, they decided at some point, as a culture, the way they practice conspicuous consumption is around religion. So all the great and the horrible things are in that picture. We as a country decided that our conspicuous consumption will be around the military. Both good and bad. Yeah, it has stopped, terrible killings because of our military. But hello, also a lot of terrible killings because of our military. Right? So that's the human condition.
Question?
Yes.
Just before her question, I was having concepts around spirit and soul,
Yes.
reincarnation,
Yes.
and no permanence in terms of self.
Yes.
So I don't want to get too caught up to overthink it, but I didn't know if you had any ideas around reincarnation specifically and how they might connect or not.
The preferred kind of Buddhist kind of vocabulary is rebirth, with the emphasis that you're birthed, you're born again and again and again and again. As to what that you is, right? Yeah. A vocabulary kind of was developed around that. To try to kind of better explain, right? So Buddha's teachings is peculiar in that the Buddha simultaneously talked about multiple lifetimes, as well as no enduring entity. And I think later Buddhists had to go through a whole bunch of, kind of mental gymnastics to kind of make it all gel together, right? But I think if we look at the early sources, you will see that the Buddha did not kind of find them to be contradictory. And so let me offer some kind of instances. If you look at early sources, whenever Buddha made any statements about there not being an enduring self, there not being a self. So this phrase anatta or anatman, often translated as not self or no self. Yeah. Grammatically, you can translate it as not or no, no self or no soul, even in actually earlier translations like Victorian period English translations of anatta has it as no soul. What's interesting is that if you look at the places whereby the Buddha talked about not self or no soul, or just this term anatta, right? It's never when somebody, and there were lots of those bodies, came up to him and say, hey, Gautama, which is his family name, right? Because Buddha means awakened one, right? Now, not many people believe that he was awakened, even if many people within the fold thought he was awakened. So, people would come up and say, hey, Gautama, do you believe in an enduring soul or not? In those instances in the early sources where he was point blank asked that question, you know what the sources tell us? They tell us nothing, literally nothing, as in the Buddha refused to answer. Do you believe that there's an enduring self or not? Then the person's like, hello, are you still there? He was like, yes. So what do you say? He says, I have nothing to say. And frustrated, they leave. Okay. So then you have his faithful attendant and cousin, Ananda. Ananda will say, Lord, why didn't you answer him? He said, and this is really interesting when he said, if I said, yes, there is a self, the consequences of that is that then he might think that I believe that it doesn't matter what you do, because this indwelling self is permanent, unchanging. Yeah, this enduring self. So why does it matter what we do? He would have that conclusion. And if I said, no, I don't believe in one, then he might conclude that, what's the point of doing anything if there isn't one? In which he says, both results are not my intention. And part of the point too, he was saying, and in any case, he said, this person didn't come here to ask a real question. He said, this person is just caught up in the thicket of views. But whenever someone comes to him, anguish, having lost a child, having lost a home, having lost a spouse, in existential pain, then Buddha says, you say you are painful. You say you are suffering. Now give me the self that is suffering, and I will pacify it for you. So the person said, I don't know what to give you. And Buddha will say, so you cannot find anything. You cannot find anything. It's what you just said that is bearing this load. I said, are you sure? Look deeper. Who is this I that's carrying this suffering? And then through this process of having this person reflect, analyze, think, contemplate, this person arrives at the position, arrives at the conclusion. The reason I suffer is because I have so strongly in my mind this notion of an enduring self that has just been insulted, that has just been, wronged. But when I actually go looking for what exactly has been insulted and wronged, I cannot find. And that not finding, oh my gosh, such a relief. And Buddha says, you're fixed. Which means his teachings are given as therapy, therapeutic. When he does talk about rebirth, it's often, again, not as a doctrinal point that he's defending, not as a philosophical point, that he has to kind of uphold and defend. But whenever he talks about rebirth, multiple lifetimes, it's always in the context of you cannot act with only your short-term happiness in mind. You cannot act by simply watching how other people are prospering or suffering right now, and on that basis say that was a good action or skillful action or appropriate action or inappropriate action. In one of the places where he clearly talks about multiple lifetimes, and it's very telling, there was one case where somebody said, or somebody came to him and said, one of our people, unspecified, one of our people within our fold was teaching his students that cause and effect, karma, you only have to look at it right now. No need to look at it from a perspective of multiple lifetimes. He said, Lord, do you say that is skillful? And Buddha says, no. He says, that's unskillful. And then the disciple said, why do you say so? And he says, if our belief in the that cause and effect are related, and if we limit it to only right now, he says, then you are going to find a lot of people having a jolly good time doing very terrible things. And he says, and if you think that doing horrible things is the answer to having a jolly good time by observing that, then you get yourself into trouble. So he's almost saying, by necessity, you have to suspend your disbelief and say, they're having a jolly good time now because of positive actions that they have done in the past that have resulted in this. But now, all the terrible things that they're doing, they will ripen at some point in the future. See, what's interesting is the Buddha did not say, I can see that there are multiple lifetimes and therefore you all should believe me. He gave a kind of a reasoned, approach to, he says, by necessity, for the purposes of having a kind of helpful understanding, you should, believe, because it makes you more careful with your actions.
Could you touch on how the Buddha came to, or like the structure around his own ethics of deciding what is a terrible thing? Like, how did he judge what's a terrible thing?
Harming others, causing harm. Causing harm to ourselves, causing harm to other people. That's terrible. All of Buddhist ethics, all of Buddhist, kind of moral ethical training is summarized in do no harm. Do no harm. Including, don't let your self-righteous moral stance cause harm to others. We know how that works. And so he says, so Buddha identified 10 kind of obstacles to awakening. The first two, the most basic one is called wrong understanding of cause and effect. That causing harm can bring, happiness, for example, is one type of that. And secondly, is called blind adherence to customs and traditions and rituals.
And then within like situations of impossibility where like no matter what you do will cause harm, is it just defaults to cause less harm?
At this point, yes. Until you develop all the skills and the power to not cause any harm. Then in a way, yes, as long as we are still in the state of confusion, we cause harm. And so we have to choose the lesser harm. And not to think that, we can have a position where there's no harm. No, there's always some kind of harm.
And like, what about the concept of guilt? Like, how do you deal with that? Because we live in this society where we're like basically constantly causing harm just by existing, like driving cars and
Yes.
smoking cigarettes and buying meat
Yes.
and
Yes.
like pharmaceutical companies
Yes.
and etc. Like, what about?
I think Buddha was quite realistic in how to handle this. And so he says that you begin at the level of get yourself out of directly causing harm. So you do that. You do that until that's pretty second nature. Then you can work on indirectly causing harm. And so I think he gave a very kind of practical approach. Unfortunately, I feel sometimes these days kind of in certain presentations of like the spiritual path, it seems like it's 0 or 100. Unless you can do 100, what's the point of doing 2? But if you look at the Buddha's teachings, it's all very kind of like you do what you can. And so you begin with the most kind of the coarser aspects of that training. So I'll give one example. In Tibetan Buddhism, we say that the Buddha's teachings are divided into 3 levels. We call it the lesser vehicle, the greater vehicle, and the indestructible vehicle. Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana. Often people think these are three different forms of Buddhism, but I think that's a mistaken understanding. It's not talking about other Buddhist traditions. It's talking about within the Tibetan Buddhist kind of path. These are three levels of subtlety. And they say necessarily you begin with the lesser vehicle, the Hinayana. Lesser in the sense of focus on yourself. Then when you understand how this particular mess operates, then you can reasonably think about benefiting others. So I gave the example to some, in one teaching to some friends, I think in Malaysia or Little Rock. It's all fuzzy now. Little Rock, Malaysia, what's the difference? And that's because it's technology, right? I just stare in the Skype. I mean, I don't know, today, is it Peru or is it Malaysia? So this is about, I said, on the Hinayana level, it says that, Buddha says that don't directly cause harm. So don't, so this is specifically about the issue of, here is the issue of to eat meat or not, you know. So on the Hinayana level, and he says, that which you have not like killed yourself. In other words, it's not saying go find someone else to kill it for you. It's saying don't go kill it yourself, because you want to avoid the direct cause of harm. So he says, if you didn't instruct someone to do it, right, and if you didn't like clap and cheer that it has been killed, right, and if it is just given to you by someone else, right, then he says that you can eat. Yeah. So that's like because there's a practical side to this. These instructions were given to his monks who went on begging routes. And so he says, whatever that's put in your bowl, right, you eat for sustenance.
Opportunity.
But you cannot, you cannot like go in the village and go, ooh, fried chicken smells really good. Then, he says, then you have, you're closer involved in, harming something. And so no, right? So whatever put in your bowl, you eat. So from that, so if you can do at least the Hinayana level, he says, that's very good. But don't stop there, he says. So Mahayana level. Mahayana level, he says, then you have to train so that you even say, no, I just will not eat. I just will not eat. Because to eat or to use, it causes harm. So that's good. That's really good.
Not eat ever.
Yes, and not cause harm or not use even leather and all of that.
Oh, wow.
Not use, not eat. Not do anything that is directly or indirectly causing harm. So very good, he says. Then he says, now on the Vajrayana level, as long as you still perceive others as not Buddhists, you have harmed them. So you have to then work on not even for a moment thinking, oh, that's just, Bob over there, it doesn't matter. He said, even a thought like that, you have already killed that person.
Wow.
It's sort of like Jesus talking about, right? If your eyes look, with lust, you have already committed. Yeah, not in the legal, court of law. You can look lustily at anything and anyone, as long as you don't act upon it. Right? So on a basic common human decency level, at least fulfill that. all your secret fantasies, keep it to yourself. Don't act them out. But not enough, it says. Next level, you want to work on getting rid of those, very illicit fantasies that you have. And then, even to perceive anyone as ordinary is already harming. So there are levels and levels. And it says, you train yourself. Now, if you say, I'm now going to, adopt a particular diet and lifestyle that I absolutely do not use, any animals cause any harm. In kind of terms, in the terms of like on the other side, I think, of course it's good. The cow and the, chicken would look at you more kindly. Yeah. But then if, living that lifestyle means you are mean to everyone that has to interact with you, then there's still quite a bit of work to do.
Like you don't have the interior.
Yeah.
You don't have the exterior guess.
Yes.
Not the interior
Right.
guess.
Right.
Maybe like start by not being mean.
Yeah. So, as a matter of full disclosure, I'm not a vegetarian, and I have a hard time, It's like I'm so attached to. It's terrible. But minimize, that's possible. Minimize, that's possible. And then try to be nicer to people. Or kind, not just nice. I mean, nice is kind of dangerous in the South. It could mean all sorts of things.
Oh, bless her heart.
Oh, yes.
But then even
The
that,
beginning
like,
of complaints, right?
it's exterior if you're not really feeling it on the inside, the being nice to people.
But also we should recognize, so the nice part, not actually kind. But of course, I think if you were a cow or a chicken, maybe it's like, well, I don't care if you actually mean it or not, as long as you don't eat me. I see that too, It's like, I could care less if you're a nice person or not. Just don't eat me. So I get that. It's hard. It's complicated. Yes.
It's a little bit off this topic, but
I think we've gone far enough.
So I'm wondering with the sukha and dukkha, what is the relationship with that and sitting and being in the world? Like, can sukha only be experienced while sitting?
No,
versus, like,
no. Yeah, good,
like being a
good,
person. in
good
the
question.
world?
Yes. No, definitely Buddha wouldn't even agree with that. But sitting practice is a contrived, artificially constructed kind of training ground. Is what it is. It's all what it is. Buddha knows that. You can't have 100% germ-free, sterile environment for surgeries. But you certainly don't want to perform surgery in the sewer. Likewise, the point is actually to be in the world awake. But that wakefulness, for many of us, is hard to experience. Where you're crossing the road, updating your status, and trying to eat your muffin and remain aware. It's harder. So then we say, let's sit, half an hour a day. Let's sit, twice a day, 15 minutes. And then from time to time, let's do a weekend intensive. Let's do a 10-day intensive. Because the mind is very subtle. As you go more into it, there are more and more subtle levels of the mind. I mean, just think about, like outside the context of meditation, right? Just think about intentionality. How often do we do something or not do something because of one intention, right? If we even look at any case of thinking about intentionality, quickly we see how complex and complicated it is. And if that's the case, when we really want to work on rerouting, that's another way of looking at what training the mind is rerouting habits. Yeah, we have an internal network where our energy kind of travels down. These circuits, right? Through our confused habits, it has been routed to kind of move in particular ways and directions, and resulting in pretty predictable results. Some of those results we like, and some of those results we don't like. Then, of course, some of those results we like it on some days and not on some other days. What formal meditation does is to reroute this network. It will still be the same energy moving and traveling and being distributed, but different networks resulting in different places. So formal meditation is a process of patiently, skillfully, slowly rerouting these networks and pathways, these habits that we have. And so, founder of the lineage I'm a part of, he says, meditation is not meditation. Meditation is habituation. So even in his time, in the 12th century, when people use the word meditation, people are like, ooh, yeah, oh, wow. So he wanted to demystify it. He says meditation is not ooh. Meditation is just changing habits. Right now, we have habits of confusion and habits of unhappiness. Formal meditation is learning and habituating, more importantly, habits of clarity and habits of happiness. If you say, I cannot meditate, you're saying, I don't know how to habituate. Ha ha, big fat liar. Not true. Yeah. We already have the skill. It's just now we are routing that skill in a different direction. So let's talk about breath, right? So many of us say, let's start with breath meditation, awareness of breath. A lot of the instructions that you might come across will say, just watch your breath. Just watch it. Don't do anything. Don't try to change it. Just watch your breath. And what happens?
You start controlling it.
Sometimes. But if you actually did that, usually what happens?
Start thinking of it.
You get bored and you fall asleep.
Start snoring.
Why? Because why? I mean, other than you're physically exhausted. I mean, and that's why they say, don't meditate at the end of the day. That's just a general advice, because some of us are actually quite alive at the end of the day. They meditate at the end of the day. Yeah, so the instructions that say, begin meditation at 4 a.m. Well, this was like before light bulbs were invented.
What if you're still awake at 4?
So people get up at 4, wide awake. So anyway, so why is it? Like these instructions on watching breath. Why do you fall asleep? Why do you get distracted? Why do you get bored? Because it's not very interesting. Why is it not interesting? Why is breath not interesting?
Too simple.
Too simple.
Like complicated.
It's always good.
It's always there. Take it for granted.
You have a habit of wanting entertainment,
You have a habit of wanting entertainment. Yes.
problem solving.
Right? Now, it's also the case that you don't find it interesting. You find other things more interesting because you don't know it.
Don't know.
Breath. And part of the problem in actually, I feel, the instructions that you were given. It's like, anchor your attention on your breath, but don't have any interest in it. They are conflicting instructions, like passively watch your breath. Don't passively watch your breath. It's like I say this is a real kind of like Buddhist problem. It's detachment before it's the right time for detachment. There's this kind of wrong view, I'll state it very strongly out there, that because Buddhists have no attachment, all of us, as soon as we can, we should walk around pretending we have no attachment, including no attachment to the practice. Oh, don't get attached, don't get attached. When was the last time you started an endeavor that you succeeded in by saying, don't get attached, don't get attached, don't get attached, don't get attached? Doesn't work. At the beginning, you should be curious about breath. Now, how do you get curious about breath? So you begin by paying attention to the sensations that breath brings. For example, there are many ways of doing it. Yeah, so you just watch, As breath fills your lungs, what's that feeling? Those sensations. And in fact, sensations of pleasure. Subtle, very subtle. Very subtle. But when you tune into the subtlety, you actually feel it. It's like,
Held your breath.
oh yeah,
It's
experiment.
very unpleasant.
Experiment, right, try at the beginning, experiment with breath. If you're going to use breath as your object for meditating, which is actually because you always have it, it's such a good one. Yeah. Well, some people might have a pebble that they put and then they look at. Some people might have the image of the Buddha or the image of Odin. I don't know, right? Whatever, right? To kind of keep your attention. But breath, because you have it all the time. And when you don't have it, then you don't need to meditate. But first, play with breath. play with it enough for you to be interested in it. That's sort of the subtleties of breath. I do not have and have not developed the ability to differentiate the subtleties between a $3.99, or was it $2.99 Charles Shore wine and a $20 a bottle and a $190 a bottle. They're all blech to me. But people take classes and courses to be able to go, ooh, Melanie, with a hint of oak. Assuming they're not making it up, and I do believe they're not, they're training their tongue, right, to be sensitive to kind of engage the layers and layers of flavors that might be there. In the same way, we have to start off with a curiosity about this object called breath. So do not be dispassionate to the object. So as a beginning, you try, like, then slow, then fast. Then at some other point you can say, okay, I'm just going to watch. If particularly that day you find that you're a little bit exhausted, but not so exhausted that you absolutely can't sit, you still want to sit, then don't do the dispassionate watching. Do the one where you say, I want to pay attention to how the lungs feel when breath comes in. And so you might actually control your breath by taking deep, long, slow breath, like, and hold it. And hold until you feel you're not comfortable, but not you think you're not comfortable, right? Get away from thinking. Feel like uncomfortable. Like what? What are the sensations I'm talking? That kind of leads to the label uncomfortable. Pay attention to that. Then exhale. And then inhale. Hold. Exhale. And then when you exhale, right, there's a certain relief, a certain openness. Feel that openness. But then your openness, you cannot continue to open, right? You also now need to gather in. Just watch that opening out, gathering in. Opening out, gathering in. Dying, being born. Dying, being born. Yes, so then slowly, when you gain ability for breath to be an engaging subject, the point again is not that there's some magic at breath. Although in order to make it interesting, you might invest it with magical properties to make you kind of like, the subject. See, that's why in Buddhist texts it says you also meditate on the image of a Buddha. Well, that is if an image of a Buddha is inspiring to you, right? It's not going to work very well, if you go give it to someone who, I don't know, when they were 3, a Buddha fell on their head. And so, they've been traumatized by a Buddha image. So it's not going to work very well. I mean, it'll make them focus, but, focus in a terrified way. That's not good. But more than anything, I would say, is being able to practice with others. That's important. That's important, being able to practice with others. It's like going to the gym. If you don't have someone to sort of hold you accountable, and if you're not a gym rat, you know, then you're like, I don't know, I don't feel like doing it. But then you're like, but I want to look like that. So that's why you might have a picture of a Buddha. You know? I want to look like that. It might inspire you a little bit, but you know, it's not the same as somebody, you know, knocking the door and say, okay, let's go meditate now. You know, get someone to pick you up, you know, and won't so easily let you go, oh, I'm busy. You know, you're busy? More so, come.
Let's using sensation
Yes.
to bring us into the present.
Yes.
And then there's a line that's too much sensation distracts us from.
It depends, right? It depends on you. Whether it's sensation, whether it's breath, whether it's Buddha image, yeah, the whole point, okay, now then, the whole point is to gather our attention, into one point. When attention begins to gather into one point, a different sensation arises. And the sensation now is no longer dependent on physical necessarily. Now it's a sensation of quiet and peace that is very kind of pleasing. Not exciting, but pleasing. And really at ease. Like, you're just completely quiet. The whole world kind of seems to have, you know, disappeared. And at the same time, you feel like you are the whole world. And then delight in, give yourself permission. Again, don't like, you know, ooh, don't get attached, don't get attached, don't get attached. You're undermining yourself if you apply don't get attached too early in the game. We've all read about, you know, this is the unfortunate thing. A lot of very kind of advanced, profound instructions are easily kind of available in books. So then you read that and you think that applies in your case. And think, don't get attached, don't get attached, don't get attached. No, you have to see, you know, why is it pleasurable? How is this quiet space really, you know, pleasurable? And you're at ease. Then, when you gain more ability in having your mind kind of withdraw and stay, yeah. Then with that basic sense of well-being, with that basic sense of well-being, with that basic sense of being at ease, right? Then you can begin to note the activities of the heart, the activities of the mind. Then you don't have to work so hard or intentionally to always keep the mind kind of anchored. Now you can let thoughts just kind of come up naturally and just let them go wherever they go.
Was that insight?
the beginning of developing insight. The beginning of developing a deeper, what is insight? Insight. You know, people talk about insight meditation. It's the beginning of recognizing how the mind works. And then you begin to see how frequently you go from the mind source to the mind ends. You go from the heart to the activities of the heart. So these are some terminology, different teachers use different terminologies that I'm kind of pulling from. You're beginning to see the heart and the activities of the heart. You begin to see the mind source and the mind ends. Then you begin, then in a way, you could say, the more it moves, the more it offers you opportunity to develop insight. If it is not moving at all, in fact, it might be hard to develop insight. That's the funny part. You see, that is when, if you even when you get to the point where your mind can blissfully kind of shut down, so to say, right? Oh, it's so good to be home. Only when you're able to get to that point, then the instructions are, don't get attached. That's when you apply that. Which is saying, don't think that just because you're home, that crazy world is not there. And you can't just stay at home all the time. And you cannot have the spiritual equivalent of stay at home and eat Cheetos the whole day. Might be blissful, but the robbers are going to figure out how to come in. And so, but first you have to be able to develop the ability to come home anytime you want and to get into that space of completely, you're at ease, rest, and nothing can disturb you. Then deliberately, you want to watch how the mind moves. And the more the mind moves, the more understanding will arise. Then, whether you're inside or outside, whether it's quiet or noisy, you're awake. That's the awakening that we're talking about, the Buddha. Then you're awake. But as a kind of attitude, you should not say, oh, and then after 5 years, I'll be awake. So that in any moment that you're practicing, if you ever get distracted, like, oh, what would awakening be? Remember, to sit is to be awake. And sit no longer just means sit. Right? Sit here means to do anything that you do to train the mind. Every moment spent on attending to the mind, the heart mind, that is awakening. That is awakening. And that's to protect yourself from, being distracted by concepts of awakening. And then forget to wake up. Right? Within the dream, you add another layer of dream. Right? You could, in a dream about waking up. And within a dream, waking up from the dream. Those are two different things. So please find a comfortable posture to sit in, whether you're sitting on the pews, on the chairs, on the floor. To be comfortable means that you are seated stable with your weight equally distributed so that you're not placing unnecessary pressure into one part of the body or the other. Yeah, so kind of sit down, sway around a little bit, move around a little bit, thinking of it as if it's a pendulum swinging until the pendulum finds that still point, that quiet point. And in that way, let your body settle. But don't think of the body settling as like a pile of like a heavy coat being dropped and then, it kind of becomes a pile. Instead, think of the body perhaps as a gigantic bell, seated, unmoving on the ground. There is weight to it, but there's also presence to it. Your eyes can either be closed or open. If they are open, let your gaze fall into that space about 1 foot to 2 feet in front of you. If they're closed, open them when you become sleepy, or even sometimes when thoughts proliferate. You might slightly open your eyes, and that could help in slowing down the rush of thoughts. Now feel the sensations in your body. Just using a mental scan, see if certain sensations are stronger than certain other sensations. And once you have identified the very explicit and strong sensation, place your mind there. Focus on that sensation. Don't think about the sensation, but feel that sensation and recognize the sensation. Do not use labels as good or bad, desirable or undesirable. Simply recognize the sensation of being there. Now let your awareness pervade your entire body. Try to place your awareness all over your skin. So that that very last place where you ends and the space begins, pay attention to that contact point between your skin and space. Then if you find that your attention is too scattered, then withdraw your awareness from the skin and have that awareness gather inside and inside and inside. Gather all the way inside until your awareness is resting on your breath. And in particular, where breath enters your nostril and where breath leaves the body through your nostril. And focus on that point. sometimes it seems like it's forever in a good way. Sometimes it seems like it's forever in a bad way.
When you visit your teacher, how long do you sit in meditation over at the temple?
Say that again?
When you visit your teacher or your, in other countries?
Oh, we just chit chat, we don't sit. Particularly in the Tibetan tradition, there is very little group sit. Because they it's not kind of known. I mean, the West, Tibetan Buddhist groups and centers kind of modify and adapt and do things differently. But in the more like traditional Tibetan monasteries, this kind of seated meditation, there's a feeling that it's not for most people. Only the savants of the tradition, after a lot of legwork, meaning legwork like prostrations, full body prostrations, right? After completing 300,000-400,000 of those, then they say, now you have what it takes to sit. And so that's why they don't have group sits, because there aren't that many people with that foundation. And so then when they do train in meditation, often is one-on-one instruction. And you go back to your kind of your retreat house or hut and you do it. And so there isn't a group. Now, among Thai, Korean, and Chinese, those who do meditate, they have a tradition of group sit. So all the Zen traditions have group sit traditions. Then in Theravada, like Thai, Sri Lanka, and Burma, in the last century, meditation has been popularized to the laity. Otherwise, again, not just laity, but even in the monastery, there's not that much group sit. Monasteries tend to engage more in studying. Yeah. But these days, you could go to Southeast Asia and go to specific monasteries that have programs in daily sitting and training people. And then there are some monasteries where they don't have those programs. Then you can go and they will give you a place to stay and they just leave you alone. And then you're left alone and you go nuts and get me out of here.
What about Indian Buddhism? Okay. Isn't there like a big tradition of Westerners going? I actually lived in India, but I never did any of the spiritual
Indian
stuff.
Buddhism basically disappeared for a long time. So modern Indian Buddhism is just starting back up. So I think what you're thinking of is more other Buddhist traditions that are kind of have, communities in India, like Tibetan, or the other one very popular by an Indian man that is of Burmese background is Goenkaji. He has, but these are modern movements basically. So you can go on a 10-day sit with them. But these are modern, 20th century revivals or 20th century developments where more and more this kind of seated meditation is now being done by non-monastics, by the laity. It's fairly recent, this development.
That's kind of cool. It's like relating to the thing you were saying about the third layer of the teachings and seeing everyone as the Buddha instead of having this differentiation between laity, like those who.
But it's not necessarily, the differentiation is not necessarily something that the elites are holding back and not willing. It's it's not surprisingly, there's modern movements of like laity meditating coincided with the rise of the middle class in Asia. Leisure has appeared as a category of time. And so initially this leisure is spent at malls. And then when malls don't deliver, then people think maybe meditation hall would deliver. Yeah, so then even like monastery, we imagine monasteries is where everybody is meditating, and that's also not the case. Again, even in monastery, leisure is a commodity that's hard to come by. Because somebody has to sweep, somebody has to cook, somebody has to repair, somebody has to fundraise, somebody has to keep the books, and that's a lot of work. And like here, you know, there's a number of people here, they will tell you, I don't come here to meditate, I come here to work. So that other people can come meditate when they feel like it. That's a lot of work to keep Urban Dharma doing what it does. In that sense, it's quite amazing, you know. Your parents didn't drop you off here at 4, and because you need to eat, then you're willing to work for the monastery until you figure out a way to run away from the monastery at least. Or, you know, you grow up and you gain an appreciation and you choose to stay. But everything is new here, and all these wonderful volunteers who come here, you know, to keep this place running, they don't owe this place anything. But the reality is like somebody pays bills, somebody sweeps, somebody cleans, somebody arranges the cushions. So leisure is hard to come by for. For the very people that are kind of like running the place. But yeah, you know, if you look at meditation movements, it's the rise of the middle class that has made meditation into mass movements. So I say, you know, if you can't meditate in the United States, nowhere else you can meditate. I mean, I have friends, you know, like in cities, no doubt, in Asia. You think you're busy, you just wait and look at them. I mean, like Japan, well known, you know, right? Kids. It's kind of sad. I think things have kind of changed, but, you know, my friends talk about how anecdotally, you know, like when teachers tell, you know, their students, you know, draw a picture of dad. And I'm like, don't know, never seen him. Because their work is such that most, what they call salaryman, right? People who work for corporations and companies. After work, you are to socialize with your co-workers because that's your kind of unit. And so they don't come back until the children has gone to sleep. And then the children wake up. By the time they wake up, you know, very early to go to school, either the father has already left because of the commute, or the father is still asleep. And then they work 6 days a week. On Sundays, you know, dad is asleep, catching up on sleep. So many parts of Asia, you know, there isn't that kind of leisure. So here, comparatively, there's a lot of leisure. But of course, you know, because of our culture, we need to fill that leisure. So then we get a, you know, written organizer or electronic organizer. Now, of course, once you have the organizer, you have to fill all the blocks. Otherwise, it looks like you're not being productive. That's very anti-American for the unproductive. But here, all the conditions are right for attending to kind of the inner life. But we have too many things to do. So I know it's not easy, but if you don't treat tending to the inner life as one of many things you have to do, then your work of tending to the inner life will not be in conflict with the other things that you do. In other words, if you're able to make tending to your inner life as the underlying place from which everything else happens, then, then it's easy. But if it's scheduled in between, I don't know, hot yoga and Pilates, then, it's going to be like, I can only do this much and not this much, right? So how do we make it kind of like the underlying? That comes from, changing attitudes. So that the inner and outer, is more kind of woven together better. Then making the journey to come here is the practice, rather than I hate it that I have to drive around to get here. Then, it's always, practice is always somewhere else. And finally, when you get here, you're already thinking about, what you need to do at 4 or at 4:30. So we're never arriving. We're always in transit. And so we have this kind of clunky term in our liturgical books called migrators. Drowa in Tibetan. It's a literal translation, migrators or wanderers, those who wander. This is not not those who wander are lost. This wanderer mean kind of aimlessly wandering. Migrators, we say. And that's the idea there, is that we never arrive. We're always becoming. We're never being. But I've lived in Asia. I go there a lot. I come here a lot, and I'm here a lot. And I can say, really, we have a lot of leisure here. We just have to kind of figure out how to fold this in so that it's not one of many things that we do, but it's the underlying place from when we do other things. Then at the beginning, don't make your sittings, your spiritual practice, don't create unnecessary conflict, between that and whatever else that you're doing. That is in part why, we don't have like regularly scheduled programs on Sunday mornings. When we started this place, because a lot of Buddhist centers or church, like borrowing from the church model, right? We'll have Sunday morning practice or service. I said, I am not confident that I can compete with people's Sunday New York Times and brunch. So why create unnecessary competition where you're going to lose, like having service on Sunday mornings? No. We tend to do Saturday and Sunday afternoons at least in my opinion, those are like dead zone. Between 2 and 5 on Saturday and Sundays. Kind of like, people in the family, kind of everybody's doing their own thing at that point. If errands need to be run, if whatever, that's usually in the morning. And then if some sort of socializing, that's usually in the evening, then there's some sort of dead zone. Of course, generalizing. But likewise, in you establishing a practice, forget about what other people tell you is the optimal time to meditate. This time, that time. I mean, listen to that and experiment. Try it. And then you have to be proactive in figuring out what works for you. That's important. And like I said, to be able to check in with a group, right? And to sit once a week, twice a week, that helps. Because doing inner work, right? If you're not careful about it, and that happens a lot, you turn into very spiritual a-holes. Because you turn inwards and you say, to hell with others. So that's why you have to check in with the community, because they will remind you you're still not very pleasant to be around. There's more work. See, if you just do it at home, and assuming most people have other people in their lives at home, but what happens with those other people? They're like, she's doing her thing, so they leave you alone. Then you think everything is fine. So that's why kind of spiritual community is important, not because and it'll be wrong to think that every time you go there, there'll be group hugs, but also because, they'll annoy you. And then you have a way to check, like, okay, it's a little bit more work to do. It's good to be grounded. Yeah. Because so much of, I think, like what is kind of being sold and peddled around is that you can do your own thing. And because that really appeals to a particular side of American identity, the can-do Lone Ranger, and I don't need other people, that's part of the problem. And so find a community, really. It doesn't have to be here. Probably not going to be here for some of you. But find your community. There are many groups here that support this kind of inner work. Find a healthy community and, go as often as you can and be kind of grounded by them. That's good. So I've said that actually I will be gone for 2 months. So a little bit of silence from my side, not because I got tired of doing this, but I'll be gone for 2 months, so I can't do programs while I'm gone. But there are 2 things coming up in July. It's posted already on the windows, and we'll send out, if you're on our mailing list, an email list, we'll send out. Lama Karma is doing 2 different programs on 2 weekends in July coming up. So you can look at the table here also, and then the sign in as you come in. So please kind of take a look before you leave, at least have some idea, and then we'll send more information out. So that'll be in July. In August, we don't know yet if we have something scheduled or not in terms of special programs. Then when I come back in September, and we'll announce sometime, maybe in August, I would like to do kind of a couple of like day-long sittings. Not so much talking, sittings. I mean, we don't sit the whole day, so don't worry. Yeah, it'll be like maybe 20 minutes and then walking, and then, 10 minutes of just kind of Quaker style, you're inspired, speak. And then kind of for one day. And that's very helpful, when a day. Because one of the advantages of the day is also you saying, okay, I don't need to think about what I'm going to do in the afternoon, what I have to. It's kind of like this day is it. So it's what retreat means, really. We use the word retreat. Retreat. It in the Tibetan, it just means boundary. To do a retreat is to artificially impose a boundary and stay within that boundary. So in September, I'm hoping we have at least two weekends where it's a day long, just that. October, for the first 8 days, the last day of September and the first 7 days of October, festivities over here. A sand mandala will be constructed. You can come every day and bring other people. Then a whole host of programs.
Temple is coming.
Mm-hmm. A whole host of programs during that time as well. So be on the lookout for information like that. Obviously, to pull something like that together for 8 days, we need help. So Judy, among other people, is sort of spearheading this festive time. And so if you are interested in helping, please talk to Judy, and we'll send out calls for help as well on email. And a lot of people usually come in during the Sand Mandala, so that's nice to have the community come and see what we're doing. Yeah, I will be in Asia. I leave next Saturday, actually. And I'm getting to Malaysia a week before a group arrives. I have a group of 20 people coming and spending 3 weeks with me. More or less, first week in Malaysia, second week in Thailand, and third week in Indonesia. So it's a Dharma and cultural tour of Southeast Asia. 14 people from Guatemala.
Wow.
Yeah. 2 from here. And then 1 or 2 here, there, and everywhere. Then after those 3 weeks, then they leave, and I will be in Malaysia for about another month. All my family is there. My parents are still there, getting old. So it'd be good to be able to spend some time with them, and then also teaching at a few Buddhist places in Malaysia during that month. And then I'll be back at the end of August, hoping that my tomato plants will still be okay and light has not taken them out.
Do you think you'll be doing another cultural Dharma trip the following year?
I'm hoping, and it might be a different part of the world, there's some request to take a group to Bhutan. Bhutan is expensive.
Bhutan is hard to get into.
Not really. Not really. Money is the obstacle. That's the primary obstacle. It's money. It's 200 and no. It's the country adopted a policy with regards to tourism. So they only have X number of permits a year. Usually if you go at the beginning of the cycle or even in the middle of the cycle, you're fine. It's just at the end of the cycle, of course, then you run into problems. But the other thing is that they also decided that they didn't want riffraff to come. You know, it's their country, they get to choose. So they chose, you know, we only want people who can afford to spend at least $250 a day. So money is the obstacle. Southeast Asia, on the other hand, like this particular trip that we're doing, is compared to other places, it's not so expensive. I might regret it because I don't know the numbers yet. I'm not a tour agent, you know. I'm just like harassing friends and family to do work for me. You know, like, could you call this and figure out this? Could you call that and figure out that? You know. So this trip is about $1,650 for 20 days.
That's great.
And I've seen other Dharma people doing a week long in Thailand for 4,000. I'm like, that's why I'm poor.
Also Guatemala, that's much more reasonable if you're coming from Guatemala.
Yeah.
So good.
So anyway, I have done other trips in the past. Michael went to Ladakh with me. Judy went to Tibet with me twice. And they're still friends and they're still here, so that's good. Never lost anyone while abroad. And there's also some talk, I don't know, it's all talk, who knows, of going to Nepal end of this year.
Like December.
Yeah. Because every year, starting on the 20th to the end of the month, there's a 10-day retreat chanting the Om Mani. Khenpo Prabhu comes here, he's the leading chant master. He goes back every year to Nepal to do that. So if I take people to Nepal, the plan is to leave the day after Christmas. Go for like, you know, the end of that retreat and then another 5-6 days of wandering around. And
We're down.
yeah, okay. So we'll see. That's a long answer to a short question. But thank you for coming, and I hope to see you all sometime soon. Come back, don't be a stranger. Tuesday nights, there's a meditation group that meets you. John Walters over there. Some of you already know. Some of you are already coming to that. Please check it out if you are curious. And he's a real nice guy. He showers. He doesn't bite. So what else do you want?
Saturdays continue.
Saturdays at 3 o'clock is the Heart Sutra practice that will continue from 3 to 4 usually. Yeah. And on Wednesday night is the group that I teach, which is the Drigong Kagyu tradition. So much more traditional. The whole 9 yards, the smells, and the bells. And when I'm gone, we've decided that there'll be a TV here, and I will do Skype into the Wednesday night group. I mean, as it is now, I on a weekly basis I teach 1, 2, 3, 4 groups on Skype. One group in Cusco, one group in Little Rock, one group in Guatemala City, and one group in Malaysia. So when I'm gone, I beam back here.
Sorry, what time is that?
Wednesday is 7 to 9. Yeah.
It's an excellent group.
Hmm?
Do a lot around here and with him. I enjoy deep teachings. Wonderful. He's the best.
You have to meet more people. You should see other people.
Should I stop the broadcast?
I was